We have the book of Hebrews, chapter 1, verse 1. I want to read the first 3 verses. God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers in the prophets in many portions and in many ways, in these last days has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom also he made the world. And he is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature, and upholds all things by his word of his power. When he has made purifications of sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. So here we have God speaking. He spoke in the Old Testament, and he spoke in the New. So what is the Bible? The Bible is a communication from God to man. And the purpose of this communication is redemption, how God plans to save man, played out in human history with 3 major covenants. We had the Patriarchal. Noah lived in the Patriarchal covenant. We have the Mosaic covenant, where Moses lived and actually brought about the Mosaic covenant. Israel lived in the Mosaic covenant. Jesus lived in the Mosaic covenant. And then finally we have the Christian covenant after Jesus' death. And that's what we call today the New Testament. Now, what is the definition of communication? This is important. The definition of communication is conveying a message from one mind to another mind to impart knowledge of some type for a specific purpose. Let me give you an example. Say it's wintertime and the ice is thin, and I say to you, don't go out on the ice is thin. Now I've communicated to you from my mind to your mind this knowledge. But if you walk out on the ice anyhow and fall through, then I have failed to communicate the specific purpose, which is not to fall through the ice. It's too thin. So it's important that we communicate. God communicates. He wants everybody to be of the same mind when it comes to this communication. Can you imagine, say, if you're a science fiction buff, there's an alien society and they want to communicate with man, and they send a message to the earth and the earth receives it. I don't think that alien society is saying to themselves, well, I hope mankind has different interpretations of this. No, they want one interpretation. They want to convey their mind to yours. And that's all God is trying to do. In fact, in Romans 12:16, if you want to turn to that, Paul talks about people being of the same mind. They understand the communication the same. You cannot be of the same mind if you have a different interpretation of the communication. So you can turn to Romans 12:16 to do that. We won't do that here. So God has always spoken to us in the past, and now he has done so, as we've just read, through his Son. Man's understanding of God comes through revelation. God has to reveal himself to us. It doesn't come from our discovery. The human spokesperson who does this communication is only the agent. He is not the author. That's very important to understand, that the agent is man, but the author is God. Now, God spoke in many ways, as we've just read. He's spoken directly, such as Moses on Mount Sinai. He's spoken through dreams. An example would be Daniel. He's even spoken through a donkey. Now when you read in here where it says in these last days, the last days is the New Testament, or the last covenant, and you can find that in Acts chapter 2 verse 17, where the church or the kingdom was being established by Peter, as Peter was given the keys and he was opening the door to the church or the kingdom in Acts chapter 2. God continues and finalizes his communication with his Son. And his Son, as we read in verse 3 down here, is the exact representation of God. He is God. And this Son, Jesus, he brings about the final purpose of the Bible, which is redemption. God brings about man's redemption by communicating with God, with man, that God is going to interfere in history for the benefit of man. And finally, his Son brings about the finality of that benefit. And we all know Jesus died on the cross. And he eventually formed the church in Acts chapter 2, which is housing the redeemed, the saved, which is the whole purpose of the Bible. Redemption, or as it says here, when he had made purification of sins. Jesus is the final spoke in the wheel, so to speak, of God's plan of salvation. All throughout the Patriarchal, Mosaic period, it was all pointing to Christ, and in the Christian period, we point back to Christ. So the purpose of the Bible is redemption, which we have in the church today. So I appreciate you watching and look forward to many other videos. Thank you.